שיש בהם יראת שמיים ויראת חטא חיים.
This is an identification certificate issued actually originally to the Hungarian military, except for the Jews who were going to the forced labor camp. They painted this big ZS, Jew, on this,
on the document.
on that. That was the first day of wearing the yellow star, and my first wife, she smiled because to her it was so unbelievable that in the 20th century this can happen. And poor thing, both of her parents and her sister was killed in those days. Mm-hmm. And she herself was captured and taken to this holding camp to Auschwitz, from where I brought her out with the help of Wallenberg. This was, of course, the most important paper that held out many times, most of the time, and saved so many lives. Not all, but many. Mm-hmm. There was no guarantee ever.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You know, I mentioned that Wallenberg, as soon as he arrived, tried to save Jewish lives when he got permission for this. He went out to the railway station. There were already people, Jews were put in wagons. He went with an assistant called Per Unger, who was a very young diplomat at the time. And Per Unger went from train to train and knocked and said, give me names, and he made a list. While Wallenberg was arguing with the German officers and so on, and the Swedish citizens are in the train and so on. Finally, the German had enough and said, who are these Swedes? And here is the list, and gave him the list. You know, that we just collected. And got these people out of the train heading to Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. So he, of course, he saved my life and my wife's lives. Gorbachev ordered a search in the Lublinka prison and found this daybook of Wallenberg's daybook from 1944, and took it home, and a newspaper called Expressen in 1990.
In Sweden?
In Sweden,
It's a
yes.
Swedish newspaper.
Printed it page by page, and my first wife, who lives in Sweden, found that page and sent the appropriate page at August 5th at 4 o'clock, Koranyi, you know. That's when I had an appointment with Wallenberg. She was at that time in a camp, a holding camp to Auschwitz called Kistarcha, and she didn't know anything about that, but on the 7th, Monday, it's 5 prisoners. One of them was her
to be released.
Released. And she wrote me a letter and sent me this page. But this is after the war.
Right.
And this is, of course, the passport itself, which was issued in August 1944, and it's a bilingual Hungarian and German, and he made it very impressive as he could, with the Swedish crown and everything else.
So it looks formal.
That's right.
It looks a formal document.
Yeah. And he negotiated with the Nazis, the Germans, and got permission to issue 5,000 like that. And that meant that we are future immigrants to Sweden, and therefore we are quote-unquote Swedish citizens. And being a citizen of a neutral country, we are exempted from the law referring to the Jews in Hungary, and that's what it states. Mm-hmm.
But eventually, Dr. Koranyi, he issued more than...
Of course, when he got permission to print 5,000, he printed 20,000, and later up to 100,000 or even more. And, well, you know, it's saved. Nobody can tell how many people, because you see, not all who had the paper did survive. Sometimes the Hungarians just tore it up and shot him, and so
they didn't respect it.
This kind of a thing. So that was not a guarantee, but in most of the cases it worked. It worked well, and sometimes it did not. Yeah. And this is a certificate from the Hungarian Office for Supervising Foreign Citizens. So I became a foreign citizen, and it had to be validated from date to date, various dates. It is translated here, the meaning. It means that I am exempt of wearing the yellow star, obligatory yellow star, for referring to Jews. That was because of Wallenberg also. And this is a Swedish certificate in Hungarian, written in Hungarian, exempting me from the forced labor camp. She had two brothers who got out, who escaped from Czechoslovakia. They were 15 years old at the time, and the only way they could get out of Europe, that they joined the Foreign Legion at the Warsaw French embassy. They were taken as foreign legionnaires to Africa and trained. And then next spring, when the German offensive was against Belgium and Paris, they were taken from North Africa, the Foreign Legion, to fight the Germans. And one of my cousins, Zolo was his name, Zolo was wounded. The other brother and another cousin, Lotzi, and that was the other name, they went to, after Dunkirk, they went to England. But this Zolo was taken back to North Africa. Eventually he had to escape from there, got to England and joined the Czechoslovakian Legion. Then the RAF borrowed him, then they trained him to be a pilot in Canada, in Montreal and in Winnipeg. All he remembers from Montreal is Dorval and Danceland. It was a nightclub. But he went back after the war and Czechoslovakia, and he found nobody. And he, except his childhood love, and married her, and they went to Israel in 1947, and he became an Israeli Air Force to the rest of his life. But her sister and parents, in 1942, they were taken to Auschwitz. And Edith was already a physician, and that's why they took her immediately into the Auschwitz hospital to work. And she got her mother in as a nurse's aide. The hope that she is better chance for survival, you know. And then 5th of December 1942, the mother, my aunt, was put in the line to go into the gas. And her daughter, Edith, the physician, ran out, got to that line, pushed out a woman from the line and took her place, and willingly went to the gas with the mother. And we know it because my cousin, who was an Israeli pilot, one day was driving home, and it was a pouring rain at night, and this woman was asking for a trip or help, and he picked her up, and they started to talk, and what's your name and where you come from, and with that woman started to wail and cry and says, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I know what happened to your mother and sister, because I was the woman who your sister pushed out of the line and took my place to go in the gas." And it was, that was one of those things. Hungarian Jews spoke German, but not
okay,
Yiddish,
not Yiddish.
unless they were very Orthodox. You know,
Yeah.
I picked up a little bit of Yiddish in the DP camp and after the war. You know, and the few sentences I knew in Yiddish saved my life, at least once. You see, after the liberation, the Russians declared a certain number of German and Hungarian prisoners of war to the International Red Cross. But then had a second thought and they shot them. But then all of a sudden they realized they have to present a certain number of people. It didn't matter who. Just a head count was important.
Right.
So well, after 1 week everybody spoke Russian in Budapest. Very primitive Russian were there for a reason. It's another interesting background why. Mind you, my Russian, quote unquote, is such that 90% of my vocabulary cannot be used in front of ladies.
That kind of Russian.
You know, this front soldier.
Yeah.
And so they were standing on the street corner and catching people. Idzie сюда, węgierski bandit. Yes. They collected us in a house and a courtyard, and then off to the railway and off to Siberia. I would never have survived it because, I was, as I mentioned, a skeleton to begin with. And I was already taken to the railway. And there was a Russian officer passing by with red hair, kinky hair, and looked unsereins, unsereins, one of us, in Yiddish. He looked unsereins. So I pulled his sleeve and said, "Redst du Yiddish?" "Emes, seid ihr ein Yid?" "Emes." Took me to the door, escorted me out. Pashli, go. If he would sit here, I would not recognize him.
No.
But that saved my life. Oh, another occasion when I was caught in similar situation, I was taken in a house where they collected these people in the courtyard. The front was bombed down, and the Russian sentry was walking up and down, 2 sentries. And I was waiting to be taken to the railway station. That was after the war, and I see that, well, mind you, I had by then sufficient training in this kind of a thing. I see that a guy goes up to the sentry and takes out a bottle of something. The Russian gets it, pashli. And then he goes and he hides the bottle in the ruins. He goes back. Naturally, the presence is evident. I stole the bottle.
Gave it to him again.
Pashli. And ran for my life. So these kind of things. You see, after the war, it was a very difficult situation because Jews who survived the war, and particularly in Hungary, we lived under a communist regime, which was as anti-Semite as comes. And so I was in a difficult situation. My dream was to become a physician, and of course, until the liberation, I couldn't even dream about it. But immediately after the liberation, and we were liberated in January 17, 1944. And well, we were somewhat of a skeletons at that time, you can imagine, because there was, beside of the Jewish issues, there was also starvation. And my first wife, who was at that time pregnant, we walked down to a Hungarian city which fell to the Russians much earlier than Budapest. And we heard that the university is already open there. So we walked there on foot. It's about 180, 200 miles. It was not an easy walk, and still in the winter time, and so it was an adventure by itself. But we arrived and we registered at the university, and finally we began our studies. And we hoped to finish our medical studies in Hungary. But we were, 1949, we were 3 months away from graduation. March 1949, supposed to graduate in June. All examinations were written in Hungarian. But the Iron Curtain was closing down so fast that we worried that we may never get out. So we escaped through the border, which was another adventure. And so anyway, we were accepted in Innsbruck with the condition that we have to repeat the last year of medical studies, and all the examination, of course, in German. From Vienna, one of us, we had a group of 5 medical students from the same class. They were all escapees. And one of them called up the dean in Innsbruck. And the dean accepted us, and that was in April somewhere, 1949, accepted us provided we be there before 1st of May. But you know, it was different zones in Austria, and we would have to go into the Russian zone, through the Russian zone, and then past the British zone, past the American zone, and into the French zone in Innsbruck. And it was quite an adventure to do that. Well, the first part, of course, was quite dangerous because the Russians... But we got a truck driver. And he took us till the Russian border, and we got out. We had to walk through the forest, and meet him after the other side, the British side, which we did. And of course we seen from a distance the Russian soldiers, but they were drunk. So mercifully, and as usual. And so the British zone, and that was, we were already safe.
Once you got to the British zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
But still we had to escape because we had to get to the French zone before May the 1st, and that could be done only illegally. So we got through the British zone illegally, and the American zone illegally, and the French zone border, and covered with soot. We arrived to the dean's office, and well, he accepted us, and then we, from there, the dean's office, because we didn't have 2 cents to rub together. Some of us didn't. I spoke German, but not that good, but reasonably. But some of them didn't. So we decided, let's go to the French commandature, and we give ourselves up that we are here illegally. They will put us in a jail and feed us, and we'll sleep and we'll dream beautiful dreams. And so, but in the French commandature, they told us to come back next week.
They didn't have place in the jail. It was probably full.
We were very disappointed. So then we were sent to this DP camp. That was again to walk another 10 miles. So we arrived after 10 miles to this DP camp, and talked to the leader of the thing, and he says, well, we have no place. And we started, I don't know, I got hysterical or something. I started to laugh. And the rest of the boys didn't know what, but they started to laugh. They started to laugh because it was so ridiculous. And then I couldn't stop laughing because I knew that they don't know why they laugh. So, and that shook that guy, that leader, so much that the crazy people immediately found some place for us, and then we stayed in the DP camp. That is the DP camp and the DP certificate. And this is the DP camp.
Right.
And you see, why is it important? Because they should know what is the DP camp, what happened after the Holocaust, that these people were kept in Germany and in Austria, in these DP camps, displaced person camps. General Patton just simply wanted to deport the Jews, 1 million of them, behind the Iron Curtain, where further persecution would have awaited them. And, well, he was a rabid anti-Semite, Patton. And, of course, West didn't accept us, Canada, United States, nobody. I even tried to get to England, no way, although I had relatives in England. Yeah. And Palestine was forbidden because of the white paper, famous incidences like the ship Exodus, like the other ships, unfortunately, who were torpedoed and people died, hundreds of them, several people. so that they should know what it meant to be a DP after the Holocaust. And then I did some extra studies. My wife, at that time we were already divorced, but we remained friends because I had an enormous feeling of responsibility for her. So she went to Sweden and I went to Israel.
And your parents arrived to Israel how?
Well, they
After the war or
after the war, you see, they were allowed out because, you see, there was a communist system in Hungary already, communist, and they simply just said that, well, we fleece them as much as we can, take as much as we possibly can. It reminds me of your document I showed you before. What is long? We had all the apartment and everything, and we had a magnificent garden. In the picture is in here in that book. Father, that was his hobby, rose garden. He had 2,500 rose bushes. Fantastic. That was in my youth. So it went to the communists, everything else. Plus they had to prepay their taxes for 10 years before they
were allowed to be
out in a shirt. Of course, you see, and beside which they were over 55 at that point. It would cost only money to the states to keep them. So the Romanians were very simple. They said to Israel, okay, as many as you want, we allow them out, $25,000 each, $25,000 each. And Israel paid. I don't know how many thousands.
Millions, probably.
Million. On that side. But they paid for ransom to also a communist regime. So that's the way they got out from Hungary.
שיש בהם